Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a place just stunningly beautiful, often called a jewel in India's northeast. Rich culture, vibrant people, incredible landscapes.
Hmm.
But right now, for the people living there, it's defined by a really painful struggle. Talking about Manipur.
Yeah, it's a state with so much potential, truly. But you look at it today and it's caught in this really intense cycle of conflict. And while, tensions have simmered there for decades, the boiling point we've seen these last couple of years is, well, it's particularly acute.
Exactly. And for you, trying to understand what's happening, our mission here is to dive into why peace is proving so elusive, what's making the state's authority feel so unstable, on the ground.
And crucially, what this daily reality actually means for the people navigating it.
Right. This period of intense conflict really boiling over for 2 years now. And then there's the central government's significant intervention about 3 months ago, imposing president's rule back in February 2025. That really sets the stage for the complexities we need to explore.
It truly is. It's a story layered with deeply entrenched ethnic divides, historical grievances that run really deep. And you can see it clearly. The immense challenge any government faces trying to govern effectively in the middle of a crisis like this.
So let's just orient ourselves a bit.
Hmm.
When you look at Manipur geographically, it's this striking contrast, isn't it? You've got the fertile Imphal Valley right at the center, surrounded by these sprawling, lush hills. And this geography, it doesn't just shape the landscape. It kind of mirrors its demographics and, unfortunately, its long-standing divides.
That geographic split is absolutely key to understanding the social structure. The Imphal Valley is primarily home to the Meitei community. They're the
Right.
majority population.
Okay.
And then the surrounding hills are predominantly settled by the Kuki and Naga communities. This ethnic and geographic distinction, while, as you said, a source of incredible cultural richness, has also been the basis for tensions stretching back many, many years.
And you're saying these tensions aren't like a sudden thing. They have deep historical roots.
Yeah.
Conflicts over land, resources, who gets a political representation.
Yeah.
This has been brewing for decades.
Absolutely. Not new at all. The disputes over land ownership, especially access to land in the hills and, who can own what, where, access to resources, and ensuring fair political representation for all these distinct groups. They've been woven into Manipur's history for generations.
Right.
Different communities feel their identity, their rights are fundamentally tied to these very issues. It's deeply felt.
But then things really truly seem to explode starting in 2023. What specifically triggered that dramatic escalation we saw then? What was the spark?
Well, what dramatically worsened the situation in 2023 were specific disputes, mostly centered around land rights, and some controversial changes related to affirmative action policies. There was a court ruling concerning the Meitei community's status, which was perceived by the Kuki and Naga communities as a direct threat. A threat to their own protected statuses and their land rights, especially their rights to land in those hill areas.
Whoa. Right.
And that fear, that disagreement, it just spiraled very, very quickly into widespread, horrific violence.
And the immediate impact of that 2023 violence, I mean, just devastating for anyone living through it, right?
Catastrophic is probably the right word. You had hundreds of lives lost, thousands upon thousands of people displaced from their homes, forced to flee, often with nothing, ending up in makeshift camps.
God.
And maybe even more damaging long-term is how the social fabric, the trust that existed, to varying degrees between communities, it was just severely damaged, torn apart, really.
So facing that level of intense violence and the breakdown it caused, the state government at the time, under Chief Minister N. Biren Singh, they clearly struggled to get things under control during that initial really intense period. It felt like the situation was just overwhelming them.
That's certainly the picture that emerges, yeah. The state government faced significant challenges in containing the chaos, the violence, and there was this growing perception that their authority on the ground just wasn't sufficient to restore order or even to effectively mediate between the communities.
Which kind of brought things to a head then. By late 2024, the situation was seen as so dire that the central government felt they had no choice but to step in directly.
Yes, that's exactly when they imposed president's rule in February 2025. The idea behind it, you can understand, was to bring in a neutral authority, hopefully one with more capacity, maybe perceived impartiality, to try and succeed where the state government had faltered.
Right.
And it's been about, 3 months now since that central role was put in place?
3 months in. Looking at the situation now, how's that actually working out? For the people on the ground, is there a sense of stability returning under President's rule?
What's really striking is that even with the central government intervention, authority on the ground still feels incredibly shaky. It's almost like, well, if you think about governance, maybe going back to Machiavelli's idea, effective rule needs both public support, let's call it love, and also respected authority, control, what he might call fear.
Okay, love and fear. Interesting.
In Manipur right now, it feels like the state government, and maybe by extension the central administration overseeing things, is struggling to hold on to either. There's still this perception of losing control, lack of visible, effective authority that the public trusts or respects enough to, restore genuine order.
And you saw this shaky authority highlighted really clearly by a specific recent event involving the Kuki community, something that seems to have been a pretty significant misstep.
Oh, absolutely. There was this controversial operation concerning certain Kuki groups that became a very public issue. Now, from what we can gather, the reported intention behind it was actually quite thoughtful, maybe, an attempt by the central government to offer what was described as a respectable exit ramp.
An exit ramp, meaning,
A way for some kooky groups to kind of step back from the harder line positions or actions they'd taken without losing face completely, a path towards de-escalation.
okay, so potentially good intentions there, but how was it actually carried out? What went wrong?
This is where the execution just completely undermined any potential good intention. Instead of handling this discreetly, maybe quiet transport, unmarked vehicles, keeping it low-key to avoid provoking anyone.
Right, subtly.
Exactly. Instead, the operation was done in this very high-profile, visible way. Involving soldiers, it came across as heavy-handed, lacking any subtlety whatsoever, almost like a public show of force.
Wow. So good idea on paper maybe, but completely bungled in practice.
Precisely. It feels like a situation where the chance for a quiet, maybe effective de-escalation move was just derailed by poor execution and a real lack of discretion. It turned what could have been a helpful process into this public spectacle that completely backfired.
And for the communities already living on edge,
Yeah.
what was the consequence of that public spectacle?
More fear.
More anger.
It led to significant outrage
Right.
across different sections of the population, yeah. And understandably, it fueled even deeper distrust among communities already feeling vulnerable and suspicious. It looks less like a sensitive effort to find a solution and more like, well, like a heavy-handed action, or even, as some people saw it, a mismanaged PR stunt.
Yeah, trying to build trust with a loud, visible show of force
Hmm.
that rarely works when emotions are running this high, does it?
Almost never. It just reinforces fear and suspicion.
Bringing it back to that idea of love and fear in governance, it sounds like this specific event didn't help with either side of that equation for the authorities. Didn't build trust, didn't really project effective control either.
That's exactly it. The perceived failure to bridge the gaps between communities, to act impartially, to address the very real, deeply felt grievances of all groups that contributes to the loss of love, the sense that the government truly has everyone's best interests at heart. And the loss of fear. And again, we mean respect for legitimate, effective authority, not terror that comes from a lack of visible control when violence erupts, combined with missteps like this operation that look clumsy or heavy-handed rather than confidently in command.
And you see this complicated dynamic playing out against what's been described as a zero-sum game mindset on the ground. Can you unpack that concept for us? What does that mean in the context of Manipur?
This is really a core challenge, makes finding peace so incredibly hard. It means that communities, largely because of those historical grievances and the current insecurity, often perceive any potential gain for one group, whether it's about land rights, political power, access to resources, autonomy, as an automatic direct loss for their own group.
Right.
There's this fundamental lack of belief that prosperity or security or rights can somehow be expanded or shared in a way that benefits everyone.
It's like everyone is fighting over a single, limited pie,
Yeah.
absolutely convinced there isn't enough for anyone else to get a fair slice if they get theirs.
That's a very good way to put it. And this zero-sum thinking isn't happening in a vacuum, right? It's reinforced by several compounding factors. You've got those deeply entrenched historical grievances we mentioned, which make building any kind of trust incredibly difficult.
Sure.
You have ongoing political pressures at various levels, local leaders, state, even national actors, where,
Yeah.
frankly, maintaining divisions might serve certain interests. And then practically, you're dealing with difficult geography, limited infrastructure in remote areas, and security forces who are stretched really thin trying to manage a wide and challenging terrain.
Behind all these analyses, though, governance challenges, political dynamics, are the very real people living through this every single day. What do some of their stories tell us? What's the human cost look like?
It's absolutely crucial for you to grasp the situation, to remember the human beings impacted. Think about someone like Thang Jam, a mighty farmer from the Imphal Valley. His fields, his entire livelihood, basically, were burned and destroyed during the violence back in 2023.
Oh,
And he's still living with the consequences, still waiting for help, for compensation. And when you hear him speak, he voices this simple, profound desire that just cuts through all the complexity. We just want to live in peace.
that's just, yeah, heartbreaking. And you hear similar pain from other communities, too.
Yes, absolutely. Consider Linnae, a Kuki woman from Chujokampur, up in the hills. She had to flee her home with her children when the conflict escalated in her area. And her story really highlights that deep erosion of trust we were talking about.
How so?
Well, as she put it, reflecting on the situation, she said, "We don't trust anyone anymore. Not the government, not the neighbors we lived alongside for years. That sense of betrayal, loss, and just utter vulnerability. It's widespread,
Yeah.
deeply personal for thousands of families."
And beyond those individual stories, what's the wider impact across the state for everyone else trying to just live their lives?
It's significant. It's pervasive. You have thousands of displaced families still living in makeshift camps, often struggling for basic necessities, even now. Schools have been closed for long periods, disrupting education for a whole generation of kids.
Right.
Businesses are struggling. Many have been destroyed completely. The state's economy has taken a massive hit, particularly tourism, which was a major source of income, but that's completely dried up. These aren't just abstract statistics. They are lives upended, communities fractured, futures thrown into uncertainty.
So taking all of this in the history, the shaky authority, even under central rule, the specific missteps like that operation, the zero-sum thinking, the devastating human cost, what are the potential paths forward? How, for you trying to understand this, does one even begin to untangle a knot this complex based on what we've seen?
Yeah, it's daunting, but it clearly requires a multi-pronged approach, something that moves beyond just trying to contain the violence. One key idea that keeps coming up is the absolute need for real dialogue, not just, photo op meetings.
Genuine conversations.
Genuine, difficult conversations. Bringing all the communities, Maites, Kukis, Nagas, every group affected to the table, facilitated by mediators who are truly seen as honest and impartial, people capable of helping bridge these really deep divides. That's crucial.
And it sounds like the lesson from that Kuki operation is absolutely critical in terms of how any authority, central or otherwise, approaches things on the ground going forward. The optics matter hugely.
They matter immensely. It starkly highlighted the need for vastly improved optics, yes, but also execution. Actions need discretion, especially when tensions are this high.
Right.
Anything that looks heavy-handed, provocative, or like some kind of PR exercise will inevitably backfire and just erode trust even further. It has to be about substance, sensitivity, and action, not creating spectacles.
Okay, so dialogue, sensitive actions.
Yeah.
What about practical support for the people who've lost everything, the Thang Jams and Lanais?
Economic support is vital, absolutely vital for recovery and, frankly, for rebuilding trust. Investing in infrastructure, working intentionally to revive tourism, maybe starting small, locally or regionally first, and providing targeted support for local businesses. These aren't just about finances.
It's about rebuilding lives.
Exactly. Restoring livelihoods, creating opportunities, giving people a tangible stake in peace and stability again.
And how does the role of security forces fit into a more constructive path? Because you need security, but clearly the approach matters.
Smarter security, definitely. While a security presence is obviously necessary given the situation, the focus needs to shift. Less emphasis on just crowd control or actions that look like displays of force, and much more on genuine community engagement.
Engaging with everyone.
Building relationships with all groups, acting in ways that genuinely protect and reassure everyone, rather than appearing to favor one side or target another. That's a delicate balance, but essential.
Ultimately, for you trying to see a way out of this, it sounds like it comes down to building some kind of long-term vision that somehow moves past that entrenched zero-sum game we talked about.
Exactly. That's the fundamental challenge, isn't it? To help create a framework where all communities can genuinely feel secure, where their distinct rights and identities are protected, and crucially, where they feel their voices are heard and valued equally in the state's future.
Finding common ground.
Finding common ground, demonstrating shared prosperity is possible, showing that one group doesn't have to lose for another to gain. It's a huge undertaking, no doubt about it.
This situation in Manipur, it feels like such a critical, challenging lesson, doesn't it? not just for the state itself, but really for India as a whole, especially when you think about how the country handles diversity and complex conflicts in its many, many varied regions.
That's a really interesting point, because Manipur's struggle in many ways serves as a kind of microcosm for challenges India faces elsewhere, particularly in its northeast, but potentially in other regions too, grappling with deep-seated ethnic or social divides.
Like, where else? Well, you look at states like Assam, Nagaland, even Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
Obviously, the specifics are different, very different in some cases, but they share complexities related to identity, land, autonomy, historical grievances. The core challenges resonate.
And how the central government chooses to navigate this situation without just relying on heavy-handed tactics seems absolutely key to its credibility, right? Not just in Manipur, but wider.
This raises a really important question for you to consider about the central government's approach to federalism, to managing diversity, how they handle Manipur, showing whether they can actually facilitate genuine peace and reconciliation rather than just imposing order through force, will profoundly impact their credibility.
Their standing in the region.
Absolutely. Not just within Manipur, but across the entire Northeast region and potentially beyond. It's a significant test of their capacity to build trust and enable true, lasting peace. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's clear is that Manipur's situation is incredibly complex. A knot of historical, social, political threads that feels, almost impossible to untangle right now.
It truly is. The layers of history, grievance, current challenges, they're immense for anyone trying to make sense of it.
But despite all of that, you really can't ignore the resilience of the people living there. They have endured just unimaginable difficulties, loss, uncertainty.
Their strength, their endurance in the face of such prolonged hardship. It's remarkable, truly.
And while the road ahead is undoubtedly long and incredibly difficult, that possibility of peace, of rebuilding, it is still there, isn't it?
It has to be.
It's going to require genuinely thoughtful action from all sides, a real commitment to rebuilding that fractured trust, and I guess a willingness to see beyond the immediate conflict to some kind of shared future.
And maybe what's truly worth pondering here, for you thinking about this conflict and others like it, is what it genuinely takes for a state, any state, to regain the trust and respect of its people after that trust has been so deeply fractured.
And perhaps, just perhaps, the real path back isn't paved with grand, forceful displays of authority, but in quiet, consistent action. Action focused on empathy, on facilitating that genuine dialogue we talked about, and proving day by day that governance can protect and serve everyone equally. Ultimately, moving towards a land where authority is based on inspiring that love, not just relying on fear.